8 News Now investigators of Valley Homes searched in connection to the Tupac Shakur murder.
Behind the notorious walls of Rikers Island lies a story few have dared to tell, one filled with raw emotion, violence, and the unraveling of a legend.
What happened with Tupac, the judge had mandated him to be in this type of unit.
What happens when a global superstar is stripped of everything, power, fame, and identity, and forced into a brutal system that doesn't see who he is, only what he represents? From whispered threats to the cold isolation of protective custody, Tupac's journey inside Rikers exposes an unexpected struggle between a man's defiant spirit and a merciless environment designed to break it. Life inside Rikers Island. Rikers Island has long been infamous, not just as a jail, but as a brutal crucible where men are broken physically and mentally. When Tupac Shakur arrived, the place was already known for its violent undercurrents and relentless pressure on inmates. The sprawling prison complex, built on landfill in the East River, felt less like a correctional facility and more like a war zone confined within barbed wire and steel gates. For many, Rikers wasn't just about serving time. It was a battle for survival amid chaos and corruption. According to Donald Richardson, Tupac's cellmate during those months, the environment was saturated with intimidation and danger. Guards often provoked fights by mocking inmates or turning a blind eye to brutality, allowing violence to erupt over seemingly trivial disputes. Richardson recalled seeing men attacked over food trays or haunted eyes locking for just a moment too long. In such a world, expecting safety was futile. The threat of physical harm was constant. Fame brought no comfort for Tupac inside those walls. In fact, it multiplied the danger. Word quickly spread that he was wealthy and powerful, making him a coveted target among other inmates hungry for notoriety. Richardson described how, to the others, Tupac was like a gazelle surrounded by lions, someone to be preyed upon for reputation or leverage. The flashing lights and roaring crowds of stardom were gone, replaced by cold stares and whispered threats echoing through steel corridors. Prison officials viewed Tupac not as an artist or a poet, but as an inmate whose celebrity status might upset the delicate balance of power inside. Guards sometimes took twisted satisfaction in humiliating him, proving that platinum records meant nothing behind those gates. For the inmates, demonstrating dominance over Tupac meant instant respect in the unforgiving hierarchy of prison life. The calculations of survival inside Rikers left no room for exceptions or special treatment. The assault on individual identity was as real and punishing as the physical threats. Tupac was reduced to a number, a uniform, a stepping stone for others' pride and survival. His music and activism carried no weight here. What mattered was learning to navigate a system designed to strip away dignity and crush spirit. Rikers was built not to reform, but to dismantle, a fact Tupac felt deeply as he endured the crushing weight of confinement. The sounds of Rikers were a constant reminder of its brutality. Piercing screams, the metal clang of keys, fists thudding against steel doors. Random acts of violence created an atmosphere of ceaseless tension, where the line between order and chaos blurred. Contraband and corruption flowed through corridors that officers were supposed to control, complicating any hope for fairness or safety. Simple actions like walking to the shower carried hidden risks, forcing prisoners into unrelenting vigilance. For Tupac, the hardest wounds weren't visible. Behind the walls, he confronted the paradox of being larger than life outside, yet diminished to nothing inside. This disconnect gnawed at him. The disparity between the man who spoke for millions and the one trapped in silent, solitary confinement. Rikers Island tested him not just physically, but challenged his very sense of self, leaving scars that no song or interview could ever fully reveal. Richardson's memories paint a bleak portrait of a system designed to exploit vulnerability and reward cruelty. Despite Tupac's defiant spirit, the weight of the prison's relentless dehumanization left its mark. Those months were a dark chapter in a life many only knew through fame and music. But the deepest truths of that time remained hidden, held in the quiet moments behind locked doors. Yet, surviving the violent chaos of Rikers was only the first ordeal Tupac faced. The next layer of isolation awaited, one that stripped away nearly all human contact and forced him into a cage within a cage. Tupac's protective custody. The paradox of Tupac's imprisonment deepened when prison officials faced a dilemma: how to protect a man at once a global icon and a potential target inside one of the most violent jails in America. His fame made him too visible and vulnerable to be housed among the general population. The solution was involuntary protective custody, a form of solitary confinement meant to shield him from harm, but one that had crushing psychological consequences. Protective custody at Rikers was no refuge. It was a cell, isolated and constricted, where nearly all freedom and interaction were stripped away. Tupac's world shrank to its barest dimensions, a small room where meals were slid through a slot. Conversations with guards were brief and often cold, and silence stretched endlessly. Richardson recalls Tupac's daily routine collapsing into near nothingness, a stark contrast to the vibrant life he led outside. No human closeness was there, and it gnawed at him, non-stop. Days stretched out into this flat monotone, like time just dragged its feet, and every once in a while it got punctuated by this pounding restlessness. Tupac moved back and forth in his cell like a caged lion, muttering under his breath, his frustration kind of leaking out into quick bursts of anger at the whole system, the one that put him here. That kind of isolation grows into paranoia, too. It feeds these fears that the guards are mocking him, or that some kind of threats are whispering past the walls and getting closer. Even a man who had controlled crowds and basically owned the world's attention still gets hit hard by loneliness. Richardson, who knew what confinement could do, he admitted how those conditions can unravel a person's mind. "The loneliness eats you alive," he said, and his eyes watered at the memory like it still hurt. For Tupac, it wasn't just quiet. It was a war against sanity, fought in silence, no audience, no mercy. But in all that oppressive quiet, Tupac grabbed the only tool he had left, his pen. Putting words down became both a kind of therapy and a stubborn act of resistance. Night after night, he spilled his pain, his anger, and all those hard reflections into letters and lyrics, and he guarded those pages like they were actual lifelines. Every single line felt like a small win against the attempt to scrub his identity right out of him. Custody was supposed to protect his body, but it locked up his spirit. Still, somehow, the confinement also pushed him toward a deeper kind of thinking. His anger got sharper, more focused, and the struggle started turning inward, even while he was getting ready to fight the world beyond these walls. The man who stepped out from protective custody came out scarred, yes, but more determined. He was forged in that silence and in that solitude, the kind he was never supposed to live through. This crushing isolation set the stage for an internal battle as intense as the external one, a conflict between the persona Tupac had built and the reality forced upon him. And within that struggle, the meaning of thug life itself began to unravel. The mask of thug life. Behind the myth of Tupac's thug life persona lay a complex and conflicted man, wrestling with the cost of the identity he had embraced. In Rikers Island, stripped of stage lights and cameras, that persona took on a different weight. No longer just a rallying cry or shield, thug life became a burden, one that seemed to invite enemies rather than protect him. Donald Richardson described moments during their shared time when Tupac openly questioned the very philosophy he once championed. What had begun as a survival code for communities crushed by poverty and systemic racism was now a cycle of paranoia, betrayal, and violence. Tupac's restless pacing and muttered verses reflected his attempt to rewrite the meaning of his own image, grappling with contradictions few outside could see. Before incarceration, Tupac acknowledged to journalist Kevin Powell that thug life was a way of survival. Yet, in prison, he revealed his fear that the idea had been twisted into something darker, fueling chaos instead of empowerment. Isolated from his record label and entourage, Tupac was forced to confront the cost of living behind the mask he had crafted. Letters smuggled to family and supporters exposed a more vulnerable side, one seldom visible in public. He wrote of missing his mother, Afeni, of wondering if his choices had set him on a path to dying young, and of questioning whether fame was a blessing or curse. Even guards who publicly ridiculed him sometimes admitted privately they saw a softer, weighed-down man beneath the tough exterior. This didn't mean Tupac abandoned defiance. He continued speaking out against injustice and asserting his resilience. But inside Rikers, he acknowledged the price he paid. Aggression and bravado were armor, shielding a distance from loved ones, from peace, and from the vulnerability he rarely revealed. The prison became a mirror, forcing him to face both the untouchable image and the man yearning for redemption. In those moments of intense introspection, Tupac's two selves stood face to face, and the burden of keeping them apart nearly broke him. The mask that had once defined him now threatened to shatter everything he had built, leaving him at the crossroads of myth and reality. The unraveling of his persona was not just personal. It was a glimpse into the human cost behind the legendary icon, a story that only those within the cold walls of Rikers truly understood. But this internal struggle was only one part of a much larger story. The complex reality of power, corruption, and survival within Rikers Island that he had to navigate each day. Corruption and contraband. Rikers Island operated under a shadowy set of unwritten rules, where corruption often blurred the lines between authority and exploitation. During Tupac's time there, this underground economy was impossible to ignore. Correctional officers, tasked with maintaining order, frequently doubled as gatekeepers to contraband that flowed freely. Cigarettes, small luxuries, and even unauthorized electronics slipped through checkpoints with surprising ease. Survival inside often meant navigating a complex web of favors and alliances, rather than relying solely on physical strength. Tupac's celebrity status intensified these dynamics. His fame transformed him from just another inmate into a bargaining chip for guards and prisoners alike. Richardson observed how the slightest interaction with Tupac,
Me having contact with him, illegal. I was never supposed to have any contact with Tupac.
became a coveted trophy among officers, elevating their status with colleagues. Privileges like a television in his cell weren't gifts, but symbols of power subtly wielded by those controlling the prison's shadow market. Rumors circulated that disposable cameras were smuggled in, allowing some guards to capture rare and vulnerable moments of Tupac behind bars. Unlike public paparazzi photos, these images stayed confined among staff, personal trophies that underscored the blurred boundary between official duty and obsession. This strange mixture of reverence and control revealed the disturbing ways power operated within Rikers. Every privilege carried a price. In a place where everything was noticed, Tupac's cigarettes, leniency, and small comforts fueled resentment among other inmates. Rumors of favoritism increased tensions, while quiet hostility spread through the block. Contraband meant power, not just possessions. Tupac understood survival required navigating that hidden system carefully, using it without becoming consumed or making himself an easy target. Despite these privileges, the harshness of prison life never softened. The very same officer who might slip Tupac a cigarette could, the next day, lock him down without explanation. These contradictions deepened the sense of unease, revealing a broken system that thrived on unpredictability and fear. Even fame could not shield him from the capricious grip of corruption. Tupac's experience inside Rikers illuminated the complexities of power in confinement, where overt control gave way to subtle manipulations, and where the line between friend and foe shifted constantly. The glimmers of privilege were often just another layer of the fight to maintain dignity amid relentless dehumanization. This reality framed the mental and emotional battles Tupac fought daily, shadows lengthening as he grappled with memories that refused to fade, especially the haunting image of a violent ambush that nearly ended his life months before. Haunted by the quad shooting. The steel doors of Rikers could imprison Tupac's body, but the memories of that fateful night in November 1994 haunted him relentlessly. The shooting at Quad Recording Studios, where 5 bullets tore into him, became a psychological wound far deeper than any physical injury. Despite surviving, Tupac described the experience as not just excruciating pain, but profound humiliation, a shattering of the image he believed made him untouchable. That assault contradicted the streetwise persona he had cultivated, a man always alert, always prepared. The stark reality of being caught off guard tormented him daily within his cell. Pacing his small confines, he obsessed over the betrayal that led to the attack, convinced it was no random act of violence, but a calculated setup by men he had once trusted. Tupac named figures such as James Rosemond, Jimmy Henchman, and Haitian Jack Agnant as orchestrators of the hit, people he considered allies turned adversaries. This conviction fueled a storm of paranoia and rage, an undercurrent that colored every interaction inside Rikers. His voice, once full of revolutionary fire, now carried a venomous edge in private writings and lyrics, stripped of earlier nuance. Richardson witnessed how this fury shaped Tupac's days and nights. The restless pacing, the muttering about unfinished business, and the ever-present suspicion created a fortress of isolation that even friends struggled to penetrate. Letters from prison echoed warnings about a treacherous industry filled with snakes and false loyalties. Trust became a currency more elusive than freedom. The consequences of that betrayal were not just personal, but also social. Inmates perceived Tupac's intensity and heard his raps laced with venom. His isolation deepened as suspicion pushed away even longtime supporters. Friends and allies distanced themselves, wary of being caught in the crossfire of his mounting distrust. Still, beneath the hardened exterior lay a man scarred beyond what guns could do. The physical wounds healed, but the deepest injury was the gnawing certainty that trust itself had almost cost him his life. This invisible wound haunted Tupac more relentlessly than any prison guard or rival inmate. Years later, Richardson openly wept, recalling the nights when Tupac's demons overwhelmed him. In those moments of vulnerability, tears fell quietly in a cell meant for steel toughness. Tupac wasn't merely scared. He was shattered by the absence of safety both inside those walls and beyond them. Yet, as one battle closed, another figure of hope surfaced beyond the cage. The network of friends and supporters reminding Tupac he was far from alone. The trauma of the shooting and the corrosive atmosphere within the prison combined to deepen Tupac's internal struggles, while the shadow of betrayal cast a long pall over his time at Rikers. These wounds would shape not only his days behind bars, but the legacy he would leave after. Letters and support. Outside. Despite the grim realities inside Rikers, Tupac's connection to the outside world remained a vital lifeline that sustained him through the darkest moments. Every morning, his cell was transformed as a steady flood of letters arrived, filling the space with messages of love, loyalty, and hope. These envelopes became more than paper. They were reminders that millions still saw themselves in Tupac's struggles and believed in his resilience, even when silence threatened to consume him. One of the stalwart voices during his incarceration was Jada Pinkett, who had known Tupac long before fame altered their lives. Their bond traced back to their days at Baltimore's School for the Arts, where Tupac first scribbled verses between classes. Though visits were limited by prison rules, Jada made every effort to bring familiarity and encouragement into his seclusion, reminding him he wasn't forgotten or alone. Queen Latifah also stood as a pillar of support during this fractured time in hip-hop, publicly defending Tupac when many distanced themselves. Her stature in the industry carried weight, lending legitimacy to her voice and giving Tupac reassurance that loyalty still existed amid turbulence. For Tupac, knowing a respected figure like Latifah advocated for him countered the narrative of complete abandonment. Jasmine Guy offered compassion in a more personal way, visiting Tupac during his lowest valleys and later offering him a place of refuge upon his release. For someone who had lived much of his life amid instability, these gestures of unconditional kindness provided grounding. They showed that amid chaos, human connection endured without conditions. Treach, from Naughty by Nature, kept hauling the flag of loyalty, pretty much constantly, stopping by Tupac and saying out loud that they were brothers. In a music scene that's often run by sliding loyalties and chart numbers, Treach's steady vibe gave Tupac a kind of reassurance, like real comradeship can hang on even when everything turns brutal. That closeness, it was a rare, soothing thing in a world that keeps leaning toward cynicism and betrayal. But honestly, the most moving messages weren't the ones Tupac got back then. It was the writing he did instead. Night after night, he covered pages with handwriting that felt stripped of that performative swagger, showing exhaustion, doubt, and a desire for peace. Those letters open a small window into a man who was tossing in sleepless hours and dealing with the heavy strain of protective custody. In one hard confession, he admitted that thug life started to feel less like a proud code and more like a curse, something that used to spark inspiration, but later dragged along violence and distance. Writing turned into a ritual, a real discipline. It held Tupac together when life was trimmed down to deprivation. His pen gave him rhythm, a way to spar with inner demons and keep purpose intact when microphones and crowds were out of reach. Even the gentler parts carried urgency. He told his mother to stay strong. He pushed younger fans to keep pursuing education, and he reminded friends to guard his name so it wouldn't fade once he was stuck behind prison walls. These letters still feel like some of the clearest, most honest windows into Tupac's complicated inner life. They hold contradictions side by side. The revolutionary firebrand craving quiet, the worldwide figure admitting personal fear, the growing legend who worried he might not make it to see his destiny play out. In a cramped cell with steel bars closing in, he kept telling himself his voice was still there even without stage lights or a spotlight, like survival was more than just breathing. It was also about staying heard, for real. Serving time in Rikers forced Tupac to fight not just for his body, but for respect, something earned anew every single day. Earning respect on the inside. Respect inside Rikers Island didn't come from past accomplishments or platinum records. It had to be earned anew under the watchful eyes of hardened inmates and skeptical guards. Tupac quickly became a focal point of attention, attracting challenges from those eager to test if the myth matched reality, or to elevate their own standing by felling a celebrity. Every interaction was a proving ground where resilience mattered more than reputation. One of the arenas for battle was lyrical. Rap battles within the prison walls were more than entertainment. They were survival tools. Richardson recalled crowded nights where men gathered, waiting to see if Tupac could hold his own behind bars. He didn't disappoint. Despite the stripped-down setting, Tupac unleashed verses with the same intensity that had once electrified arenas, turning wordplay into armor against hostility. Yet this was no staged show with applause. The silence of hardened prisoners was the harshest judge. These were men whose respect had been earned by years, sometimes decades, of navigating the unforgiving prison system. Even the guards on duty were taken aback by the raw energy and unapologetic force that Tupac brought with him, not on a stage, but within the cell block's confines. Physical confrontations, too, were inevitable. Reputation was often sealed with bruises as much as rhymes. Stories circulated about Tupac refusing to let guards humiliate him, answering insults with sharp words or a shove when pushed too far. Richardson assured that Tupac wasn't reckless. He was deliberate, a man unwilling to be broken, no matter the odds. Even when tensions started boiling over among inmates, Tupac didn't back down. Not really. His size alone didn't do the heavy lifting, but his determination and that refusal to cower made people give grudging nods. For others who might have preyed on him, it became clear, underneath the celebrity skin there was a man with grit, shaped by struggle and survival reflexes, honed long before those gates even opened. The defiance Tupac showed wasn't only about making it through. It felt like an extension of the whole way he carried himself. Resilience over submission, he often said. In his mind, thug life wasn't about painting crime as something glamorous. Nah, it was more like proof that dignity can hold steady even in systems that are engineered to strip it away piece by piece. Inside Rikers, every battle Tupac fought, lyrical or physical didn't matter, turned into a kind of evidence, showing he stayed faithful to that code. He lived it out loud, challenging not just assailants, but also the entire setup that was supposed to break him. That's how he became a figure both feared and respected, all at once, even if some people didn't want to admit it. Donald Richardson's reflections also push back on a bunch of misconceptions about Tupac. Contrary to the talk that Tupac was a phony or a crybaby when things turned rough, Richardson insisted there was integrity there, and an authenticity that not many people actually saw. By the end of his sentence, inmates and even some guards who used to mock him came to recognize his strength and that stubborn resolve. In the unforgiving little world of Rikers, Tupac ended up with more than scars. He earned respect. For a man whose life was basically a constant contest for recognition, that respect was worth more than any headline or any story people tried to sell. It was survival in its purest, most plain form. The respect Tupac won inside those walls was a rare victory, but the weight of his time in Rikers left lasting marks that would forever shape who he was, both as an artist and a man. Legacy of Rikers on Tupac. Tupac Shakur's time at Rikers Island left an indelible mark that shaped not only his art, but also his outlook on life and the world around him. Locked away from the fame and freedom he once knew, Tupac experienced firsthand the crushing effects of a system designed to break men. Yet, within that crucible, he forged a resilience that deepened his voice and expanded his message beyond music into a raw, human testimony of struggle and survival. The isolation and hardships of Rikers peeled back the layers of his public persona, revealing a man wrestling with profound contradictions. Behind the bravado and aggression was vulnerability, conflicted feelings about the thug life he once embraced, the price of fame, and his own mortality. His writings during incarceration, full of reflection and doubt, showed a side rarely seen by the public, a thoughtful, troubled soul confronting the cost of his choices. Rikers forced Tupac into a reckoning with himself that few ever witness. The silence stripped away distractions, compelling him to face his fears, his anger at injustice, and his hopes for redemption. That internal battle intensified the complexity of his artistry, giving his later work a sharper edge and deeper emotional weight. His voice didn't just speak for himself anymore, it spoke for countless others trapped by circumstance and systemic failure. The scars from Rikers extended beyond physical or emotional pain. They touched Tupac's worldview. His distrust grew, fueled by the betrayal from men he once called friends and the harsh realities of prison corruption. Yet, despite this, his passion for justice burned brighter, refined by the harsh lessons learned behind bars. This duality, a fighter hardened by pain but driven by hope, became a defining feature of his legacy. Tupac's journey through Rikers also highlighted the fragile balance between survival and self-destruction. The privileges and dangers intertwined in the prison ecosystem mirrored the contradictions in his life. Fame offered both leverage and liability, protection and exposure. Navigating this landscape demanded constant vigilance and adaptation, a microcosm of the broader struggles he faced outside the prison walls. Despite the pretty harsh environment and the personal trials, Tupac never really lost that creative spark. His pen stayed his weapon, still pushing out lyrics and letters full of urgency and sharp insight. Those words, written in the dim light of a prison cell, were sort of an anchor, yet also a beacon, like proof that even while confined, the spirit could refuse erasure. His stretch at Rikers didn't just happen, it expanded his craft into something like a testament of endurance. Tupac's experience kept echoing past the prison walls, influencing an entire generation and helping shape hip-hop's cultural landscape. His willingness to name pain, betrayal, and the search for respect really landed with people. It made him a symbol, resilience against oppression, not just a headline. The lessons learned and the scars carried from Rikers added more layers to his public story, shifting him from a controversial figure into a voice that sounded painfully clear for change. Still, what came out of it all wasn't only triumph. There was also this cautionary kind of weight about the real cost when systems fail people. Tupac's story points straight at how brutal prisons like Rikers can be and how they don't rehabilitate or mend or heal. It's a reminder that behind the headlines and behind the celebrity glow, there's a human being working through complicated pain and also was stuck in structures that often don't care about redemption. In the end, Tupac left Rikers not just with scars, but with a changed sense of purpose. A voice made harder by silence, yet still unbroken. A man who used the trial to say truths that keep echoing today. His legacy is, honestly, a powerful testament to how the human spirit can endure and how deep the impact can be when experiences are hidden away behind prison walls. Tupac's time in Rikers Island reveals the harsh realities behind the fame and music, a journey of survival, reflection, and resilience. His experience reminds us how prison can break or build a man, shaping legacies in unexpected ways. If you found this deep dive insightful, please like and subscribe for more stories that uncover untold truths. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.